Can I now invite the leader of the council to move the report in accordance with the practice adopted in previous years? You'll have a maximum of 10 minutes for this purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Neville. And I rise to propose the 2015-2016 council budget and the medium-term financial plan through to March 2019. In doing so, I'd like to thank the many staff throughout the council who have been involved in the preparation of this budget, a balanced budget with a council tax freeze. In other words, a 1.2% cut in council tax in real terms. A Labour council helping hard-pressed families. And I think this is important because we know the pinch that are being felt by residents in the borough as a result of austerity. And so despite this enormous pressure on individuals and on the council, we have again frozen the council tax. 6 years of freeze. It's been an interesting year, hasn't it? New Labour administration following a sweeping victory in 2014. Some new faces, ministers on the opposition benches. New ideas about shaping our way forward. A new manifesto. And of course, many achievements since the last discussed budget proposals this time last year. So despite cuts in central funding, despite all the avengers of doom on only some of those seats opposite, despite a patchy economic recovery, this administration has delivered on its word. Of course, it would be wrong of me not to draw attention to cuts in government funding. Since 2010, we've seen reductions of 96 million. For next year, we expect to see yet more reductions of 21 million. And the austerity that's biting across the public sector. The health service seems to be in perpetual meltdown. Education funding again won't be increased in real terms. Defence is selling off yet more of its assets. Police funding falls further. Welfare cuts have been cost-shunted onto local government. The Better Care fund is double counted. It's quite interesting, Better Care fund, the way that the government is able to suggest it's new money, when in reality, of course, it's simply recycled money. And I would like to pay tribute to all those who have been involved in the budget consultation this year. A record number of responses and a strong set of priorities that we've been happy to follow in our budget report. And a special well done, I think, goes to the Youth Parliament. Over 5,000 votes from across the borough on the issues that are important to them. It's an exciting prospect that young people in the borough are engaged in this process. Now tonight, the debate will inevitably focus on why we, as council administration, have a sensible, proportionate and planned approach to the impact of savvy disproportionate cuts, while members opposite will try to create a picture of inadequate planning, lack of hard decision making and too much spending on long-term improvements, creating borrowing demands. I think I'd probably save us an hour and a half if we just stopped. Such is the inevitable local political dynamic. But I want to paint perhaps a slightly broader picture. I think members opposite should admit, but perhaps they won't, that local government has borne the brunt of austerity. The coalition appears to see local government as the easy option to cut. While government ministers travel from their offices in Whitehall in their air-conditioned limousines to Parliament and around, real people suffer. Libraries up and down the country have been closed. Youth services have been decimated. Streetlights have been turned off. And core services strangled. Perhaps the most damning aspect of all of this, as reported by both the National Audit Office and the Public Accounts Committee, is the DCLG simply doesn't understand the impact of its own decision making. Now I believe, members on this side will believe, and probably some members on the other side will believe, a change of government will improve our position. Simply because we can expect a fairer funding formula and better managed deficit reduction. Paradoxically, with a needs-based system of government funding, the most deprived areas have suffered the largest cuts. How can it be right to use, if I use an example from the rest of the country, How can it be right since 2011 Liverpool has lost £391 per head, while Windsor has lost £14 per head? Liverpool is the second most deprived local authority in the UK, Windsor the 317th. This simply is not fair and is an expression of the policy of this government. And in Enfield, we suffered the most significant loss of tens of millions of pounds because of grant dumping. And I'm happy to concede that this is not a party political issue, and members opposite have supported the position that we've taken, and we support the position they took on this issue. And I can tell the Council that along with other boroughs in the north and north east of London, we're considering a challenge to the government on this issue with a letter of board action. So we think that there is real merit in taking this case back to the Treasury. We're being let down on adequate funding, even in a period of declining resources. So if we get a fairer and better funding package, Enfield residents will be able to enjoy better services. But I'm honest enough to concede there's no fountain of magic money over the next few years. But they shouldn't be made artificially tougher for Enfield than for some other authorities. Increasingly, the use of services in Enfield will follow a different pattern of access, significantly more digital. And our project, Enfield 2017, is a key component of transforming how our residents better use services, but also to contribute to the savings for the budget over the next few years. Increasingly, we will look to integrate services with other bodies. That means coordinating, as we've done with the Health and Wellbeing Board, bringing public services together for economy, efficiency and effectiveness. But more and more trade-offs will be required. Flight evening, clear-ups, buying, libraries for cash. Social care options and leisure options compete. Politicians who ignore the reality of hard decision-making do so at their peril and live in an Alice in Wonderland fairy land. Alice in Wonderland fairy tale. Thank you. Grown-up politicians do not conduct themselves in that way. I look forward tonight to hear what members opposite will propose as an alternative to the difficult decisions that we're making. I would look forward to members opposite not simply saying they disagree with what we're doing, but to spell out specifically what it is they would do differently. Now, I think from a managerial point of view, we do well as a council. We manage issues, but we don't want to manage simply decline and decay. We don't want to have a local council that simply carries out statutory social care, statutory waste management, concessionary travel and child protection. And up and down the country, that is effectively what is suggested that local government is limited to. Well, so what does that do for what makes life pleasant and enjoyable in Enfield and elsewhere? That is the outcome that the government is creating. Now, I can pledge that the Labour Council will not let that happen without a fight. A fight for better resources, a fight to give all our children a good start in life, a fight to help our most disadvantaged and those in most need, a fight not only for current residents, but for future residents and future generations, a fight to keep Enfield clean and safe, a fight to create a better future for Enfield. And Mr. Mayor, I believe this is a fight where right is on our side. The government appears to know neither the price nor the value of local government services, and that is no less than a scandal.
One more, please, Councillor Taylor.
I will bring my remarks to a close.
Thank you.
The budget is balanced and protects services where we can. Members opposite should join me in bemoaning Whitehall's indifference to the needs of real people living in Enfield. Mr. Mayor, I commend this budget to you and to the Chamber, and I look forward to its unanimous endorsement later on this evening.
Is there seconded?
Mr. Mayor, I will second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I now invite the Leader of the Opposition to respond once again. Following practice adopted in previous years when dealing with the budget report, you will also have a maximum of 10 minutes for this purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by spending a couple of moments on the national position. It seems to me that quite simply without a growing national economy, local public services are necessarily reduced. I want to look at the improving national position, not actually, as Councillor Taylor asserts. It may be painful for him and his colleagues to actually look at that improving position. But the reality is that it is improving, and it's only improving because of the hard decisions, and they are hard decisions, that the national government took. Indeed, it is a national government, it's a coalition government. And because of those decisions, we're now beginning to see the real seeds of recovery. Inflation is at 0.3%, its lowest since 1955. In practical terms, very important to the residents of Enfield and everywhere else, because the vulnerable ones in particular can have access to cheaper food. We know that that's precise because that's one of the measures that is comprised in the CPI index. Equally, with oil contributing to a slight fall, should be more, but a slight fall in energy prices and a significant fall in prices at the pumps. Employment, with 1.85 million people in the country back in work, more than work in 2010, 73%, the highest employment rate for decades. You will say, doubtless, Mr. Mayor, members opposite, will say that these are insecure or poorly paid jobs. Well, the ONS says otherwise. The ONS says 3/4 of the new jobs that have been created since the election are full-time, and wages rising significantly faster than inflation, pay going up 2.1%, while inflation over the period measured is 8.9. Sadly, unemployment in Enfield is higher than the London average, and it's higher than the national average, which begs the question, what's this Labour administration doing to bring about new jobs as other boroughs seem to have done? Well, of course, I'm forgetting about market gardening. Now, that is a panacea for all ills in Enfield, isn't it? But will it be, Mr. Mayor? It was announced 2 years ago, but so far no new jobs have been seen, or no more than a glint in the eye. When they do, the likelihood is that the bulk of them will be for seasonal pickers on less than minimum wage, I dare say. Nationally, long-term unemployment has reduced over the past year by 210,000. As a whole, it stands at 5.7%. Compare that to 8.4% in Enfield. And we know that there are questions to be asked of Labour, but we also know, one from experience, that there will be no satisfactory answers. Tax receipts, another good indicator of a growing economy, are at their highest since 2008, across all sectors of the tax regime, but in particular corporate tax receipt, corporation tax receipts and self-assessment. Mr. Mayor, you've heard all the whinging from the administration about cuts and how wicked Conservative-led government is. But conveniently, members forget that the mess that we inherited in 2010 was in no small measure due to the economic mismanagement, not to say gross negligence, by Labour governments of Messrs Blair and Brown and the excessive borrowing that they indulged in. And that brings me very nicely to this budget. First things first, it has to be said, because it hasn't been said, that the budget effectively provides for actual council tax reduction of £4 as a result of decisions by the Conservative Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, his 6th consecutive cut. By contrast, the best that we have here is a freeze in the budget, thanks to yet another grant, no less, of 1.2 million from the government. We say you can do better. These budget papers show quite starkly the extent of borrowing that the Labour administration is engaged in and will engage in over the next 3 to 4 years. The debt level in Enfield, grab these figures, will, under this administration, increase from 270 million in 2009-10 to 383 million at the 31st of March this year, and is projected to rise to 552 million by the 31st of March 2019, a staggering increase of 104%. you want references, Councillor Georgia, take appendix 4, page 106. By that time, council taxpayers will be paying an additional £8.50 in council tax just by way of interest at service debt. And by 2016, interest on council debt will take up no less than 10% of the total revenue budget. That inevitably means higher rates of tax and or reduced services. Sadly, Mr Mayor, what the administration is doing is saddling future generations, our children, our grandchildren, with enormous amounts of debt, such that the borough will not be able to easily recover. It will be said by members opposite, well, we believe in investing in the borough. Mr Mayor, I've got news for them, so do we, at the right time and on the right projects. You see, Mr Mayor, the position is that much of the additional borrowing that this administration is engaged in is a matter of political choice. They choose to borrow 100 million over 5 years, 20 million a year for their so-called gateway scheme. They're buying houses in Enfield to deliver additional properties for temporary homeless, competing at the lower end of the market with young people who want to get on the property ladder. What would we do, Mr Mayor? We would spend some money purchasing homes, but we certainly wouldn't be purchasing in this borough or in London. We would be looking for properties far out of London, where you will get more for your money and therefore not have to borrow so much. This would have the beneficial effect of placing people in stable communities and simultaneously reducing the ongoing burden on Enfield and London. Had they made real progress, of course, over the past 5 years with Meridian Water, new homes would be coming on stream. Instead of this, we learned last Friday that this, the largest housing scheme in London, does not be listed as a housing zone by the Mayor. Why? Unquestionably because they have not made sufficient progress with the development. 5 years wasted. And then we have schools, Mr Mayor, where extensive borrowing has taken place to top up government grant for schools, but that too is sheer political choice, based on ideology. If they were to accept and embrace academies and preschools on a larger scale, then of course they would not need to borrow nearly so much, so again it's political choice. A political choice which, like so many of their choices, doesn't have to be paid for by the people making the decisions. Only the rest of us are picking up the tab for the outdated ideology. And whilst we're on borrowing, let's talk about the latest proposals to capitalise items, which have previously and rightly been a matter of revenue spending, or day-to-day, day-to-day spending. We are capitalising salaries, we've got capitalisation of pothole repairs, there is a list of these items, Mr Mayor, which is less than satisfactory. In fact, Mr Mayor, this budget has all the hallmarks of a recalcitrant debtor who mortgages himself to the limit and then puts the food bill on the credit card. Mr Mayor, the problem for Labour is that they came to power in 2010, had done no planning as such for administration, and throughout their 4-year term did little to tackle the necessary cuts in revenue support grant that had been well orchestrated in the 2010 emergency budget after the general election of that year, and which in any event could have been foreseen by any right-thinking persons knowing the state of the country's finances at the time. It gets worse, Mr Mayor, because in 2013 Chancellor Osborne announced further cuts for the period 2015 to 16. Did they plan for that? No. They went on into an election with a set of entirely disingenuous proposals which had little or no regard to the impending financial difficulties that were well known about. And they did so almost certainly in the hope that the general election shortly upon us would produce some different government which would bail them out. But unfortunately for them, the truth is out. No one is going to be bailing out any authorities, this or any other, because there simply isn't the money to do it. As Liam Byrne famously wrote to his successor, the money's all gone. Instead, authorities need to be making hard choices. Choices about borrowing.
Thank you.
Choices about borrowing, such as I've outlined, I'm sure, and choices about revenue. I'm sure we all have wish lists, what we like to do in our private lives, but we all know that you can't have what you can't afford, and you can only borrow what you can afford. Mr Mayor, the council has no money other than that it gets from taxpayers and from government grants. It's simply no use saying that we can't afford it, so we'll borrow. There is no question but the revenue budget needs to be trimmed. It needs to be trimmed. It needs to be trimmed, Mr Mayor, in respect of temporary accommodation, where we are one of the highest spenders in the 32 boroughs, and where in this last year we've spent 15 million as against 5 million the year before. No controls being exercised, just keep building the budget, people will keep coming, landlords will keep coming to. Accordingly, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move a reference back of this budget by way of an amendment to the Cabinet for reconsideration to apply the following principles that I've already outlined.
Councillor Neville, time.
Borrowing and current borrowing. 2, amend the Housing Gateway project to purchase outside of London. 3, embrace free schools and academies.
Councillor Neville, time.
May I just move the last 3 points? There's just 3 one-liners. Bring forward 2017 to now. Reduce the budget for temporary accommodation and abandon the landlord's licensing fees. If we do that, we'll actually produce a 1% cut in council tax. I move.
Okay.